Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I was halfway through showing Piper how to angle the light off a chipped brick wall when my phone buzzed. I checked it without thinking. One text. From Weston. Sold your old camera for $200. We needed the cash. Don't make it a thing. I stared at the screen like the words might shift into something sane. They didn't. I looked at Piper. She had her camera lifted, framing the rust-stained stairwell like she'd done this 100 times. She was 15, sharp, quiet, way more serious than most kids her age. "You okay, Zane?" she asked, not lowering her camera. "Totally," I said, steady as I could. "Let's shoot one last set, then we'll do a quick edit." My hands felt like I dipped them in ice water. I kept them in my pockets. Quick check-in. Drop your city or country in the comments. Curious where you're listening from today. All right, on to the story. The camera Weston sold wasn't some dusty junk. It was a Leica Zero series, one of the originals from 1923. Great-granddad carried it through Europe while filing war stories that ended up in newspapers nobody kept, but I still read in archives. It passed to my dad, then to me. I wrapped it in oilcloth and locked it in a metal case with his old telegrams and stamped ticket stubs. That case lived in a back corner of my folks' basement. After Weston's last breakup, he crashed with them. Said he needed a couple weeks to reset. That was 8 months ago. I should have known he'd dig through whatever wasn't nailed down. I finished the critique with Piper, boosted her contrast, dropped the highlights, showed her how her shadows hit harder than words. She looked at the screen, then at me, and smiled the way kids do when they finally see what you're seeing. That saved me for a minute. I breathed. In the car, I typed, "I understand." Weston hit me back with a thumbs up, like he'd just sold a futon on Craigslist. 8 minutes later, I got a call. Philadelphia area code. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Nash? This is Spencer Langford. Langford and Kober Rare Photographics." His voice was careful, like he thought I might break the phone if he said the wrong thing. He asked about a Leica Zero series. Specific one. Small scratch under the rewind knob, old leather strap with a brass rivet pressed flat from time. My chest locked up. "That's the one," I said. My breath fogged the glass even though the AC was blasting. Spencer told me a man had brought it in, claimed it belonged to his brother, paid in cash, said it was clean. He didn't mention price. He did ask what I knew about its history. I told him the bones, war coverage, Europe, passed down by blood. He asked if there were any papers. I said there were telegrams, receipts, typed letter from a Paris desk, all wrapped in ribbon. "I didn't see those in the case," he said. That told me Weston hadn't even looked. I asked him a question I don't throw around lightly. "Are you straight with people?" He didn't sell himself, just said, "I pay fair and sleep well." That was enough for me. "I've got a proposition for you," I said, then pulled out of the lot, headed toward the river. My hands finally stopped shaking as I turned onto the highway. Mom set down her potholders like they could shield her from what was coming. Weston folded his arms, leaning back like this was a courtroom, and he had some kind of defense. I stayed standing. I wanted them to feel the shift. "Zane, it was just in a box," Weston said, like I hadn't already heard that excuse 100 ways from him before. "In the basement, next to old games and junk. I thought it was leftover gear from your old shoots." "You thought wrong," I said. "It was locked, in a metal case, with my initials stamped on the side." Dad set down the paper, finally admitting to himself this wasn't a background noise moment. "What exactly are you trying to say?" he asked, like I was the one picking a fight. "I'm saying the Leica wasn't just mine. It was documented, passed down, listed in the will. You want to read it?" I opened the binder, flipped to the page with the yellow highlight, and slid it across the table. "That camera has more family in it than Weston ever will." "Come on," Weston muttered, rolling his eyes. "You act like I pawned Grandma." "You might as well have," I snapped. "You didn't even look at what was in the envelope. You sold it without a second thought for rent money. That's not a mistake. That's theft. I didn't know, he said again, and now his voice had that thin edge of guilt, like he just realized this wasn't blowing over. Rent was due. My boss cut my hours. I was trying to stay afloat. You can drown without dragging history down with you, I said. That camera's not just some relic. It's the kind of thing collectors wait their whole lives to find. Mom was standing still now, arms tucked across her chest. We didn't realize it meant that much. You keep so many things down there. That one was different. You know that, Mom. You saw Dad hand it to me. You took the photo. That's in here too, I said, tapping the binder. Dad looked at the page finally, eyes landing on his own name, then mine. His jaw flexed, no words coming yet. But the denial was leaking out of him. He knew. Langford called me, I added, shifting focus to Weston. That's the name of the buyer. He's not a street hustler or some guy with a camera shop. He authenticates historic pieces for museums. He knew what it was within seconds of holding it. Weston whispered, "What's it worth?" With all the provenance? Easily 7 figures, I said. Without it? Still a fortune. And you sold it for $1,200 like it was some point and shoot from a garage sale. The silence was heavy, thick, the kind that makes your stomach knot. I opened the folder and started laying out the papers, telegrams in faded ink, the receipt from a Hamburg dock, a smudged letterhead from a newspaper office in Vienna. This is what wasn't in the case. These prove where the camera's been, who used it, what it captured. That story is the value. Weston finally sat back, defeated. So what happens now? We unwind the sale, I said. Spencer's honest. He'll return it once we clear title, and I'll make sure he gets paid fairly. But this won't happen again. I slid a second page across the table, a list of terms, plain and short. You don't go near my things. You don't sell what's not yours. You don't text me with emergencies that end in excuses. You broke trust, Weston. I'm not patching it for you. Come on, man, he said, voice cracking. I didn't mean to screw you over. You think I like asking for help? You didn't ask. You took. Mom finally moved toward the table, sat beside Dad like she needed an anchor. So what will you do with it? She asked. If you get it back? I want it seen, I said. Displayed. Tied to a story, not a vault. Spencer and I are going to talk terms. Long-term exhibit, public viewings, school access. I've got plans. For a camera? Dad asked, skeptical still, like the idea of photography meaning something real didn't track in his mind. No, I said. For a legacy. For a story about this family that isn't just barbecue birthdays and awkward Thanksgivings. For kids who shoot on cracked phones because it's all they've got. That camera could light a fuse for them. Mom blinked. Is that what you do all day? Make stories out of old stuff? No, I said. I make documentaries people stream when they want something real. I sign NDAs. I fly to places you've never heard of. I do deals that fund the center you think is just a cute volunteer gig. The teaching's what I love. The rest pays for it. She stared at me like I'd spoken in a different language. Then she nodded. Do what's right, honey. I am. And then I grabbed the binder, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. I stepped into Langford & Co. About 20 minutes after walking out of my parents' house with the weight of 3 generations tucked under my arm. Inside, it felt like time moved slower. Langford & Coers sat a few blocks off the river, near the old post office, Philly through and through. Shelves lined the walls, deep wood drawers with labels in neat brass frames, prints under glass, catalogs with soft spines that looked red but respected. The air had that old film smell, paper, metal, dust that had earned its place. Spencer met me halfway across the floor, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms, shirt pressed, hair still damp from the kind of shower you take when you know the day's going to matter. He gave a short nod, less hello, more go ahead. He reached into a drawer beneath a long, green-felted work table and brought out the Leica. He didn't hand it to me. He set it down, slow and steady, like it had lungs and needed to breathe. "I'm guessing you slept rough," he said. "A little," I said, though I hadn't really slept. Just laid in bed with my hands behind my head, staring at the ceiling and wondering when Weston turned into a cautionary tale. He walked me through what he'd found. Original Light's body with faint brassing, exactly the kind of wear you get from decades of real use, not fake aging. Period-accurate strap rivet. Crescent scar under the rewind knob. He hadn't forced open anything that didn't need to be, hadn't polished away any of its truth. "These are harder to fake than people think," Spencer said, adjusting the light over the table. "The patina tells on you." I pulled the envelope from my bag. Yellowed papers, thin telegrams, a folded map. The ribbon had mostly disintegrated, so I'd bundled it in a clear sleeve. I slid it toward him. The shift in the room was immediate. He stopped talking and started reading, held the carbon copy from Hamburg up to the lamp, squinted at the date, traced the half-faded stamp like it was a signature on a check. He read the note from the Paris desk twice. When he saw the name in the corner, my great-granddad's, he looked up at me but didn't say a word. "I'll tell you straight," he finally said, laying the paper flat. "With this paper trail, you're looking at 1.5 to 3 million. Depends on who's bidding and how much they care about owning a slice of recorded memory." He didn't grin or puff it up, just said the number like it deserved to be respected. I nodded. "I want more than the number." He raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. "I work with kids. Some come from nothing, some from worse than nothing. They shoot on cracked phones and discount point-and-shoots. But they see. You'd be shocked what they pull from a dying block or a busted alleyway." Spencer listened, still. "I want the Leica on a wall, not behind velvet. I want its story right next to it. I want kids to walk up and see that history's not locked up. It's reachable. Even if it's through glass, even if it's in words they've never heard before. I want it to mean something to someone who can't afford the ticket." "We can do that," he said. He kept it simple. Long-term exhibit, public hours, hands-on demos with training cameras, a plaque listing your family, and the community center. He added, "But if we do this, I'm paying the full price, not what Weston scraped from the bottom of Craigslist." I told him the number. 2.35. It's not the top, but it's fair. Clean title, full materials, the display rights, all of it. He nodded. "Done, pending one thing." Then he turned the Leica over, set it on its back, unlocked the base plate with a careful twist. I didn't breathe while he did it. He eased the bottom off like a chest cavity, revealing a dark metal film cassette I'd never even realized was in there. "Sometimes," Spencer said, "people leave ghosts inside." He pulled a light-safe bag from the drawer, slid the cassette in, and cracked it open with a set of gloves that looked like they belonged to a museum tech. Inside, he found the film, still wound tight. "Could have been shot and rewound. Could be blank," he said. "Only one way to know." He threaded it onto a small hand-crank viewer, turned the knob slow, steady. No rushing. The grain bloomed into shape. A street appeared. Old cobblestones. A pair of men in long coats. A wide banner strung across a narrow road. The letters were thick, a language I didn't know how to pronounce. Then, a boy, perched on a lamppost, one leg swinging, looking down like he owned the sky. And in the edge of the frame, just past a storefront window, a reflection, barely there, of a man holding a Leica. "The rewind knob's scratch is in the reflection," Spencer said, his voice low. "Same serial, clear as day." We stared for a full minute. The world didn't move. "That's provenance you can't argue with," he said. Then he made 2 calls, one to a museum curator in Philadelphia, another to a conservation tech. The negative would be stabilized, the serial documented in situ. The story didn't need defending. The contract he drafted was longer than anything I've ever signed in my life. First page voided Weston's sale, clear title back in my name. Next page handed it to Spencer, with new terms, fresh bill of sale, conditions around display and usage. By noon the next day, the funds hit the escrow account I set up with the bank. I stepped outside and stood in front of a used bookstore 2 blocks over, let the air hit me for the first time in days. Then I called Maren. "We did it," I said. "Also, there's a ghost in the camera." She laughed, sharp and fast, then stopped when I told her the truth. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Also, we're getting tacos tonight. No arguments." I hit the driveway right after sunset. My mom's porch light flickered like it always did when the bulb needed replacing, but no one got around to it. Weston opened the front door before I knocked, like he'd been watching through the blinds. He looked like he wasn't sure whether to apologize or brace for a punch. I didn't say a word, just walked past him, straight to the kitchen, and set the printed wire confirmation on the counter. 1 page. Bold numbers. Mom picked it up with both hands like it might break. She read it slow, her voice shaking. $2,350,000. She looked up at me like I'd grown an extra head. Dad came in from the hallway, saw the number, and sat down hard in the nearest chair. Then stood right back up, like sitting down had been a mistake. "You're not pressing charges?" Mom asked. "No," I said. "I got made whole. But this doesn't vanish." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded letter, laid it in front of Weston like a final exam. "You're going to read this and sign it. It says you don't touch my property. You don't misrepresent ownership. You attend the Saturday budgeting class your landlord's office runs." He stared at the paper like it had teeth. "Seriously?" "Yes, seriously." He didn't argue. Just signed, quick and silent, like he knew there wasn't another play. "I'm also calling 3 dealers I know," I said. "They'll flag your name. It's not revenge. It's prevention. If you try this again, they'll know to call me first." He winced. "Zane, that's brutal." "No," I said. "It's guardrails. If that feels brutal to you, maybe you've been skating without consequences too long." Nobody said anything after that. The only sound was the fridge kicking on. I leaned against the counter and let the quiet thicken until someone cracked. It was Dad. "What exactly do you do?" he asked. "Like for real?" There wasn't any attitude in it, just confusion. "I make documentaries," I said. "Streaming deals, studio contracts, pitch decks with my name at the top. I work with people who fly private and pretend they're broke. I edit rough cuts at midnight and sign NDAs that would make your eyes cross. It's not every day. It's not always steady. But when it hits big. I've learned to store grain." He nodded, slow. I could see the math working behind his eyes. Mom looked at me like I was a stranger in a familiar skin. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because every time I tried, you asked when I'd apply for a county gig," I said. "You called it real work. You thought teaching at the center was cute. You didn't want to hear about the rest." She didn't deny it. She just lowered her eyes and touched the corner of the check with her fingertip like it could change something. Weston finally spoke, voice low. "How do I fix it?" "You can't fix what you broke," I said. "But you can pay back the $1,200. Donate it to the youth fund at the center. Then keep your head down for a while. Show you've got more to offer than a string of screw-ups." He nodded, but it wasn't quick or easy. It looked like it hurt. Maybe that was the point. Later, back on my porch, Maren showed up with a paper bag full of tacos and a face that made the whole day feel manageable. She didn't say much at first, just sat beside me, kicked her shoes off, and handed me a foil-wrapped one with extra green sauce. "What do you need?" she asked. "Quiet and crunchy," I said. She nodded and dug in. After a couple bites, she licked sauce off her thumb and asked, "So, the boy in the photo?" "Yeah." "What do you think he saw up there on that pole?" "History," I said, coming fast. And he wasn't scared. He just wanted to be taller than it. She smiled. "You should write that down." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll just tell Piper." That got her attention. The kid from your workshop? Yeah, she's different. She watches the way people hide grief in angles. She frames shots like she's been fighting shadows her whole life. You know those photos that say something without shouting? That's her work. Maureen tilted her head. Get her a real camera. I plan to. I'll find a deal, she said. You don't need to chase one. That's how she was. No drama, just action. I told her about the gear library, about putting real tools in the hands of kids who'd never seen glass that cost more than their shoes. She was already pulling her phone out before I finished. I'll draft the proposal tonight, she said. You can review it over coffee. It'll be on the director's desk by 10. I leaned in and kissed her. No fireworks, just quiet and right, like flipping a switch that should have been on the whole time. She kissed me back, no hesitation. About time, she said, mouth brushing mine. You take forever, you know that? She left not long after, bag in one hand, binder in the other. I sat on the porch for a while, chewing through the last taco, watching the street stay still. Weston texted me 3 times in a row before midnight. Sorry, I mean it, and for real this time. I put the phone face down on the railing. In the morning, I typed one thing. Make the donation, then call me when you've got the receipt. We got off the train at Suburban Station and walked the last 3 blocks through crisp wind and early light. Piper stayed close to the edge of the sidewalk, like she didn't want to take up space she wasn't invited into. She didn't say much, just adjusted the strap on her bag and kept scanning everything like it might disappear if she blinked too slow. Spencer met us at the museum's loading entrance, ID badge clipped, dark coat buttoned up like a guy who didn't trust October. He gave Piper a nod, just enough to say she mattered, then turned and led us inside without the usual tour guide chatter. This wasn't a public visit. This was backstage. The conservator's lab looked like a clean room for memory. Metal tables, filtered lights, drawers labeled in handwriting too neat to be faked. The guy doing the work had a calm, careful face and hands that didn't move unless they had to. He didn't give a lecture, just walked us through what he'd done like we were co-workers instead of tourists. Humidity control, gentle brushing, stabilization without chemical stress, digital backup without exposure damage, basic steps, he called them. He pinned the negative under a piece of UV-protected glass, and the room stopped breathing. It was clearer than the hand crank viewer had let on. The boy on the lamppost looked even taller, the edge of the banner more readable now. Letters sharp, bold, cut from history like a headline left behind. You could see the bricks in the building behind him, the curl of wind in his coat, the blur of 1 foot mid-swing. The curator stepped in then, quiet, but not soft. Dr. Myers, late 40s, gray at the temples, eyes like someone who'd stared down 100 stories through their artifacts. She didn't waste time on hellos. She pointed with a pencil and spoke like a coach correcting form. The banner's Catalan, she said. Political gathering, early 30s. This square's been renamed twice. That building in the back? City records place it at 1931, maybe 32. That lorry behind the men? Matching number showed up in a maintenance log. Not a big day, not a known protest, but someone saw it coming. Marin took Piper's elbow and nudged her forward. Piper leaned close, eyes tracking every inch of the negative like she was solving a puzzle nobody else had spotted yet. Dr. Myers tapped the corner. The shop glass confirms it. The camera is in the reflection. Spencer glanced my way. I didn't need to speak. I just nodded once, slow, and let it land. Piper stepped back, arms crossed tight. Then she looked up at the image and said, real quiet, he saw everything. Her voice was barely there. That boy on the pole, he's not scared. He looks ready. Dr. Myers looked at her like she'd just hired a new junior curator. What's your name? Piper, she said. Well, Piper, she said. That's exactly the kind of insight most adults miss. Then she looked at me. She yours? Not officially, I said, but she's with us. We left the lab and stood under a massive Dorothea Lange print near the west wing. Dusty hands, lined faces, eyes that had seen too many bad seasons. The kind of photo that doesn't look dramatic until it hits you in the ribs. Marin's hand slid into mine. No ceremony. Just heat and anchor. "You going to let them put your name on the wall?" she asked. "Only if they hang community work under it," I said. "Deal," she said. Didn't blink. Dr. Myers caught up with us near the main gallery doors and asked about exhibit terms. I told her I'd already worked it out with Spencer. The Leica would sit in his public space, with lecture sessions and school hours. This museum would get the negative and the paper trail, shown together in a way that made sense to real people. Labels that didn't talk down. No fluff, no gold-framed nonsense. A story told in plain language, the way my great-granddad would have written it. Spencer added a twist I hadn't expected. "We're running a limited print series," he said. "Archival only. 25 pieces, numbered, signed by the estate. You. Profits split between this museum's education fund and your center's youth program. Keeps it clean. Transparent." I looked at Piper. Her eyes were still on the negative, but she was listening. That kid could split her attention without blinking. "Sounds fair," I said. "Make it happen." On the train home, we found seats in a quiet car. Piper took the window and started shooting. Blurred edges of buildings, people waiting, bags on benches. She moved quiet but steady, like she knew what she wanted to catch. Marin fell asleep on my shoulder 10 minutes in, curled toward me like she'd done it 100 times before. Spencer flipped through a vintage camera catalog, probably just out of habit. I looked at our reflection in the train window, one kid learning to see, one woman who always moved toward what mattered, and me. A guy who taught shadows to beginners and had signed contracts with numbers that used to terrify him. It didn't feel like pretending. It felt earned. When we got to our stop, Piper stood up and handed me the camera. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked a little. I held it out to her again. "Keep it." She froze. "For real?" "It's yours now." She held it like it had weight, not in ounces, but in trust. Her eyes started to shine, and she blinked hard to keep it down. "I'll make you proud," she said, voice tight. "You already do," I told her. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked out of the station into the parking lot, chin up, duffel bouncing at her hip. She looked 10 feet tall. We locked in the date for a Friday night, knowing that was our best shot at turnout. Flyers went up at the center, the museum posted it online, and Marin made sure every teacher in a 10-mile radius knew to nudge their students. Spencer arranged the case for the Leica. Low profile, bulletproof glass, discreetly alarmed. Dr. Myers blocked 10 minutes for her talk, more if the crowd leaned in, and the kids, our kids, filled the halls with their work. Piper's photo got the anchor spot, right by the water fountain, across from the vending machine that always jammed. Black and white, tight composition, alley cat mid-step across a flaking red door. Eyes forward like it had a schedule. She mounted it herself, tape precise, corners square. That afternoon, Weston texted me a photo of a folded receipt from the youth program, won $200 even, dated and signed. I sent him a thumbs up and the link to the Saturday budgeting class again. He didn't write back, which was fine. The point wasn't conversation. The point was follow-through. Dad called a couple hours later. No small talk. Just said, "I'm proud of you, son." I told him, "Thanks," and let the silence sit between us like a chair neither of us minded sitting in. By the time the event started, the gym was packed. Parents, students, city staff, some reporters, a couple teachers I hadn't seen since the grant pitch last year. It buzzed like playoff night, only quieter. Phones out, whispers rising and falling like waves. I opened with a short speech. No script. Sometimes a relative makes a choice that's not theirs to make. Sometimes that hurts. But we fixed it. And tonight, you get to see what making it right looks like. I didn't say Weston's name. Didn't need to. Dr. Myers stood beside the Leica case and spoke with her hands behind her back. She kept it simple. why the negative mattered, how the reflection proved the serial, how history lives in the quiet frames, not just the loud ones. Spencer didn't say much, just stood off to the side with his usual stillness. Piper stood next to her photo like she belonged there. A reporter from the local ABC station came by, camera rolling, asked who took the shot. Piper didn't flinch. "I did," she said, straight, clean, no apology. I watched the feed that night. 6 o'clock news, local feature. There she was, voice clear, hands loose at her sides, a kid becoming visible on TV in front of her whole town. After the applause faded and the crowd started thinning out, Spencer came over and shook my hand. His grip was light but final. "I got a call this morning," he said. "Dealer across town. Said someone tried to offload a matching piece. Old Zeiss. Said it fell off a shelf." I didn't have to ask who. "Before you worry," Spencer added, "I already flagged him. Quietly. Trade circles aware. No deals with Nash's brother without your written okay. Not personal, just policy." "Thanks," I said. My jaw was tight, but I meant it. It wasn't about Weston anymore. It was about damage control. Spencer nodded once and disappeared into the museum table setup. That man could fade like mist. Then Burke showed up. Late, like always. Designer jacket, smile sharp as his haircut. He found me near the display of student prints and clapped me on the shoulder like we were old war buddies. "Zane," he said, dragging it out like he'd just spotted the main character. "I've got something you're gonna want. Detroit rehab story, real grit, celebrity angle. Think viral series. We fast track." I didn't even blink. "No thanks." He kept smiling, squeezed my arm too long. "Careful," he said quietly. "Guys like you make easy edits when the wrong person gets mad." The threat was tucked in like it was friendly advice. That was Burke's move. Suit it up, dress it down, call it business. Marin watched him walk off, eyes narrow. "Friend?" she asked. "Business," I said. She didn't even roll her eyes, just pulled out her phone. "I'll flag his name in our project files." That's how we worked. She documented risk while I kept the lights on and taught kids to see. A little later, after most of the crowd cleared out and the noise dipped back into conversation volume, Piper's caseworker, Ms. Doran, pulled me aside. She had that social worker calm, like nothing surprised her anymore, but everything still mattered. "She trusts you," she said. I nodded. She doesn't say that word lightly. Honestly, she doesn't say it much at all. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Ms. Doran looked at me for a second longer than most people do when they're thinking through all the bad outcomes. "If you ever consider being a resource home," she said, "I'll walk you through it myself." "Let's set a meeting," I told her. She nodded, shook my hand, and moved back toward the exit with a clipboard tucked under her arm like a shield. On the way out, Marin pointed to a flyer thumbtacked crooked to the wall near the office. "City Arts Grant," she said. The edges curled. The deadline circled in red Sharpie. She plucked the pen from her coat pocket and drew a thick circle around the date, then stuck the whole page to my chest with 2 fingers. "We're building the gear library," she said. "You write the pitch. I'll build the budget." On my stoop later, long after we locked up the center, she leaned against the railing and looked at me for a solid beat. "You keep your cool when it matters," she said. "I like that." I looked back at her and said, "Stick around. See if it's real." She grinned at that. "I'm not going anywhere either." We stayed up half the night writing that grant. Marin on her laptop at the kitchen table, me pacing with a notepad like I still needed to see the words written in pen to trust them. No fluff, no fake drama, just what we'd built, what we'd seen. A pitch that didn't beg. It offered. We called it what it was, an investment in gear, training, and trust. A camera library for students who couldn't afford lunch some days, but still knew how to frame light like it owed them something. 6 pages. Clean. Straight talk. Marin pulled quotes from local teachers and one from Piper's social worker that made me pull over when I read it in my truck. She used to withdraw. Now she documents. We paired it with a 1-minute reel. Kids saying what holding a real camera did to their brain. One boy said, "It made me walk a different way to school, just to see things." That line stayed with me. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Unlisted, temporary. I picked up. Weston. The line had that tin can echo of a prepaid cell. "Hey, listen," he said. "Any chance you can loan me a little? I had a thing fall through at the worksite. Couple hundred would fix it." "You've got millions, Zane," he added before I could answer. "You won't feel it." "I'm not your ATM," I said. "Call the budgeting class. Call your supervisor." "You serious right now?" he snapped. "After everything?" "Exactly because of everything," I said. He hung up without another word. I stared at the empty line, not surprised, not even angry, just done. The next morning, Maren came into my office holding a plain white envelope. No return address, no frills. She handed it to me like it might bite. Inside was a legal letter from Burke's team. Pages of carefully vague phrasing. Basically a threat, dressed up pretty. If I didn't join his new show as a consultant, they were prepared to run a piece evaluating our program, suggesting it was exploitative, manipulative. Kids' faces, selective edits, just enough rope to stir doubt. Maren read it twice, slow and focused. Then she looked at me and said, "We'll handle it." I called Joan O'Malley, the lawyer I keep for contracts and cleanup. Old school, sharp, not easily impressed. I forwarded the letter. She replied within hours. Her cease and desist was a velvet-wrapped dagger, precise, cold, and legally bulletproof. It reminded Burke what consent, defamation, and minor protections mean in a courtroom. It also gave him a taste of how expensive the next step could get. His reply came fast. Suddenly we were all friends again. Misunderstanding, tone taken out of context, nothing but respect. I didn't answer. Piper kept shooting. She came into my office one afternoon with a stack of printed shots, life at the bus stop, hands holding backpacks, feet in mid-stride, a pair of eyes peeking through a torn scarf. She didn't ask for critique, just handed them over like proof. She said, "One of the girls at my group home braids my hair sometimes. She misses her cat. B, you can kind of feel that in this one." She pointed to a shot of a worn bus bench with one handprint on the metal backrest. "Stories live in little things," she said. "Yeah," I told her. "They do." A couple days after that, Maren and I ended up at a diner off the highway. Vinyl booths, cracked menus, and pie still served on paper plates like it was 1992. She passed me a small box across the table, silver, palm-sized. My pulse jumped for a second. Then she laughed. "It's a thumb drive," she said, grinning. "Final grant budget. But I saw your face. You thought I was proposing." "Briefly," I admitted. But I wasn't scared. She sipped her coffee, not breaking eye contact. "I've been thinking about us like a plan, not a maybe." I said, "Same." We didn't say love, didn't have to. It was in the room, in the reach, in the way she leaned across the table like gravity was on my side. The museum emailed that night, confirmed the date for the Leica's first public display. The negative would be in the side gallery, prints from the kids on the surrounding walls. Spencer was hosting a panel talk at his showroom. Dr. Myers was in. He asked me to join. I said yes, without hesitation. Ms. Doran came by the center the next day, folder under one arm and a checklist in her hand. "Home visit, background check, parenting classes," she said. "You can do a lot of this together if you're serious." She didn't say, "about Piper." She didn't have to. Maren and I looked at each other and nodded at the same time. "We're serious," Maren said. "Let's get started." Piper was in the hallway, half pretending not to listen, but I caught the way her shoulders relaxed just slightly. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. No punctuation, no emojis. Just a photo of him holding a point and shoot I'd given him 16 years ago. The caption read, "Took your mom to the river, got the heron." I stared at that photo longer than I probably should have. It was blurry, framed off center, but the bird was there, neck out, still. It didn't matter if the focus was perfect. They were trying. That counted. We squeezed extra chairs into Spencer's back gallery, but it still wasn't enough. People stood along the walls, elbows tucked, necks craned toward the panel table. Lights overhead weren't flattering, but no one cared. The Leica sat under glass in front of us like a quiet witness. Spencer opened with 2 lines, then passed the mic to Dr. Myers. She summarized how the shop window captured the camera's reflection and confirmed the serial, craft and patience, not magic. When it was my turn, I didn't prep anything. I just told the story straight. My great-granddad, the camera across Europe, the case Weston took, the panic sale, the museum call, and the negative, the boy up on the lamppost watching the day unfold. I told them how kids at our center learn to see in angles, how a photo can change the path someone takes to school. A blogger in the back asked if selling the Leica felt like losing family. "No," I said. "Family's not an object. It's what you do with it." Spencer's mouth tipped. He'd been waiting to hear that. After the event, I found Marin in the courtyard behind the gallery, sitting on the edge of a stone planter, drink in hand. The air had that early fall chill where you debate if you need a jacket. I joined her and said what had been sitting in the back of my throat since the grant went through. "I don't want to make plans that don't have you baked into them." She looked over at me, not surprised. "What kind of plans?" "The kind that require signatures, not just budget approvals." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring. Simple band, no diamond, no gilt-sized rock trying to prove anything. I didn't do speeches, so I just asked, "You okay signing some papers with me that aren't for the center?" She laughed once, then covered her mouth. Her eyes welled up in a way that shut down every sound around us. "You're a dummy," she said. That was her yes. I asked again, properly, ring in hand. She said yes again, same way. No show, no stage. Real. We told Piper over pizza at the corner place where the booth cushions were all duct taped and the soda machine never poured right. She looked between us, squinting like she was solving a math problem. "Does that mean you'll still have time for class?" "More time," I said. She nodded like she was the project manager and we were interns. A few days later, Burke slithered back in through email. Said he'd heard a rumor that Weston had tried to move another piece. Asked if I wanted to comment. I wrote back one line. "Comment is reserved for counsel." Then I forwarded it to Joan. She replied with a short note that made my own spine straighten. The story never ran. Silence sometimes wins. Then the city called. We got the grant. Not massive, but more than enough to start right. 8 solid mirrorless cameras, sturdy stands, a lighting kit that didn't come in pieces, a cabinet with a key that didn't stick, and a lock that didn't jiggle. Marin danced in the office like a kid who just got a snow day. I joined in. Badly. Piper laughed so hard she almost fell off her chair. Ms. Doran's first home visit came that Friday afternoon. She showed up with her folder and her "let's keep this practical" tone. Marin had already planted herbs in the window. Mugs in the cabinet didn't match, but they made the place look like people lived there. "You two seem steady," she said, flipping through her checklist. "Piper needs steady." "We'll be that," I said. At the end of the visit, she asked Piper if she wanted this. Piper crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and said, "I'm not a puppy. Don't take me home if it's just a whim." I said, "You'll have your own door. It'll close and lock. It's yours. And I want to keep shooting." "Done," I said. Marin added, "And your own toothpaste. No one touches it." That's what cracked the smile. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. That night, we laid on the couch with the TV playing something forgettable, Marin's head on my chest, Piper upstairs organizing her new desk like it came with a final exam. I thought about how a locked-up Leica in a dusty basement somehow turned into this. 3 plates on a table, a budget binder on the counter, and a house that finally sounded full when someone closed a door upstairs. I don't get poetic. But that night, I slept like a guy whose dad finally stopped asking if he was ever going to get a real job. The museum didn't bother with a velvet rope, just folding chairs, coffee and paper cups, and a podium that leaned sideways if you touched it wrong. It wasn't glamorous, it was real. Dr. Myers opened the event with a short speech about everyday history, how the biggest moments don't always look like headlines, how some stories survive because one person kept something safe long enough for it to matter. Spencer followed with a quiet talk about preservation. His voice stayed even, but when he pointed to the Leica under glass, his hand lingered like it meant more than he let on. Then they pulled the cloth back from the frame, the first print from the negative. The boy on the lamppost stared out like he'd seen the room coming for 100 years. The crowd shifted when they saw the serial in the reflection, tiny, tucked in the lower corner like a secret no one thought to hide. A woman from the second row stood up after the applause. No big announcement. She walked over to Spencer, handed him a check, and asked that her name not be used. She ran a city college scholarship for first-gen students, said she wanted the print for her boardroom, said kids should see it before they sign their future on a line. She paid $62,500. No haggling. Per our agreement, half went to the museum's education program, half to our center. Enough to run classes for a year and fund field trips without begging parents for cookie dough fundraisers. After the crowd cleared, I caught Weston outside pacing near the curb, cheap suit, anxious fingers tapping his thigh. He saw me and came over fast, voice already spinning. I got this idea, man. Vintage furniture line. Real salvage stuff. Not junk. Just need a little stake to get it moving. I didn't answer right away. Let him hear his own pitch echo off the cold stone of the museum wall. Same tone, Weston, I said finally. Same hustle. I've heard it before. This is different, he said, but he didn't sound sure. I told him what I always told him. Sit in the class. Bring me a plan with numbers that add up. Then we'll talk. His mouth opened like he had a counter-argument, then closed. He nodded once, stiff. I won't ask again. Good, I said. Work the plan. Inside, by the coat rack, Dad stopped me with a hand on my shoulder. He looked uncomfortable in the crowd, like a guy who still expected people to read paper classifieds. I'm sorry I didn't see you, he said. No long speech. Just that. I hugged him, quick. We're good. And we were. Marin and I went to the courthouse on a quiet Wednesday morning and signed the license in front of 2 witnesses from the clerk's office who barely looked up. We didn't post a photo. We didn't plan a party. We told the people who would show up unannounced anyway. Piper made us a card, photo of a stop sign overlaid with a bird mid-flight. Under it she'd typed, "Don't stop." Ms. Doran moved fast after that. She came by with a folder of requirements that felt longer than the lease on my old apartment. Classes, fingerprints, personal references, pages where you had to describe your philosophy on discipline, on bedtime, on food. Marin filled hers in with the same careful handwriting she used for grant paperwork. Mine looked like a cameraman held the pen wrong. Meanwhile, the city grant funds landed. Marin practically dove into the budget spreadsheet. We made a list that felt like Christmas morning. 8 camera bodies, 3 prime lenses, 2 reliable zooms, tripods that didn't slide, a rolling case with wheels that could handle Philly sidewalks without tipping. Piper picked out 3 colored straps, red, blue, gray, and labeled them for sharing. She looked proud, and like she didn't know what pride was supposed to feel like. Then Burke tried again. He texted Weston. I saw the screenshot on a Tuesday afternoon, sent from my brother with a caption that just said, "This guy again." Burke's message read, "Your brother's not who you think." That was the bait. Weston didn't bite. He didn't respond. That surprised me. Maybe the class was working. Maybe he was finally too tired to chase drama. We set the date for the guardianship paperwork filing the Monday after the courthouse signing. I told Piper straight. No surprise. I don't do surprises, I said. Good, she answered. Surprises mess me up. We all laughed a little too loud at that, like people who were finally allowed to laugh in the same room. We got married on a Thursday morning at 10:36, standing next to a clerk who looked like he'd rather be at lunch. The pen they handed us barely wrote, so I pressed hard until my name left an indent 2 pages down. Marin wore a navy dress she could pitch a grant in and still get compliments. I wore the one suit I owned that didn't make me feel like I was pretending to be someone else. We kissed, signed, and stepped out into sunlight that hit the concrete just right, like someone had planned it. We didn't toss rice. We didn't post it. But I caught her hand as we walked down the courthouse steps, and she squeezed it back like a promise. We loaded her plants, her books, and a chipped blue bowl that apparently had too much character to toss into the truck. 12 minutes later, we pulled into my driveway. It wasn't mine by dinner. Her mugs in the cabinet made the whole kitchen warmer. She stuck a note on the fridge that read, "Welcome us." I grinned like an idiot every time I opened it for the next 3 days. Piper showed up that evening with a duffel slung over one shoulder. Not moving in, just curious. She wanted to see what a spare room looked like when someone made it for her on purpose. Marin had set it up quiet and thoughtful. A comforter that didn't match anything, a small desk under the window, a lamp that dimmed. I'd hung a corkboard and left a box of cheap prints clipped and ready. It didn't scream, "You live here now." It just said, "If you want to, this space knows your name." We had spaghetti and bagged Caesar salad at a thrifted table that didn't wobble. I cooked. Marin poured. Piper told us about a cat on her bus route that chased a garbage truck like it had a shift to clock in for. We laughed, then laughed more. It felt like regular life, which is all I ever wanted. After dinner, we hung 3 frames on the living room wall. Left, one of my favorite stills from a series I shot upstate, fog rising off a quiet field, crickets louder than traffic. Right, Piper's alley cat photo from community night, eyes bright, mid-step. Center, a photo we took 5 minutes earlier. Tripod, self-timer, Marin's head on my shoulder, Piper flashing peace like she meant it. Slight blur, big grins. We put that one in the middle like a flag. I told Piper what we wanted. Legal guardianship, first step. Not just to be helpful adults. We wanted to be the ones on the emergency contact list. The ones who showed up when the toaster broke or the math homework went sideways. The call when her bus ran late. She looked down at her hands, then back up at us. "Do I still get to lock my door?" "Yes," I said. "And pick a paint color?" Marin added. "Absolutely," I said. "And keep shooting?" I pointed at the little basket by the front door. "We already bought your batteries." She laughed and wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie like she didn't want to make a scene. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." Paperwork would take time, but Ms. Doran had the path lined up. First guardianship, then adoption, once the ink dried and the court signed off. That night we did dishes the way I always hoped a house would sound. One of us washing, one drying, one stacking. Music low, light steady. After we crashed on the couch and watched an old travel show where nothing bad happens. Just people eating weird food and smiling too much. Before bed I sent Spencer a quiet thank you. Then I emailed Dr. Myers a photo of our wall. "This is where it landed," I wrote. She replied, "Perfect." I turned off the light and looked at that center photo one more time. It wasn't a trophy, not an exhibit. It was a family. I'm 56 now, telling you this like it's a story, but it's just my life. A brother who finally hit bottom. Parents who stopped asking the wrong questions. A camera that found the wall it deserved. And a kid who became ours. Not just on paper, but in the way she dropped her bag by the same chair every night. That's the whole thing. It's enough. What would you have done if someone in your family sold something priceless behind your back? Forgiven them, or cut them off for good? If this story hit you, drop your thoughts, or just say you liked it in the comments. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to us.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.